I'm going to have to put a bit of backstory to this. Why did I end up traveling with Ric Flair? I used to travel with Steve Austin. Pretty much not long after I got to America, me and Steve Austin became from the first day. My first day of TV, we got on, and not long after I got there, he became my regular traveling partner. As if you've listened to his podcast, I believe he's mentioned that now and then. And he, for some reason, he considers that some of the best times of his life, and I do as well. And the reason being is because we were just young fellas going out and wrestling every night, and he didn't have all the pressure of having to, which you do. When you're in that spot, people ask me, and you know, there's a few of you today, you should have been world champion. I would much rather you wonder why I wasn't world champion than why I was. Because when you get to that level, that is an incredible amount of pressure to put on people, right? And I never, by the time I was ready, I didn't really want that. I didn't want that because I've seen what it does to people, and it ruins their lives. And I did a good job of nearly ruining my life and my family's life by being stupid for a few years of my life. I didn't want to go there because when I was working 180 days a year for WWE, if you're world champion, you're working 500 days a year and 30 hours a day. And whether you know it or not, with the exception of only one person I know, and I won't say who, but one person I know, it hasn't affected them majorly in their life. And yes, you can have millions of dollars in the bank, but you've got nobody at home to go and you're just on the road, and it's a stressful time, and you hear these stories, and they're not my stories to tell. I didn't want that. I didn't want to have that pressure on me because it's too much. I'd learned that very early on. So I was having a great time traveling with Steve Austin. Eventually, Triple H came, and straight away, do you want to travel with me? Because I know what it's like to be a newcomer or a foreigner in a lot of countries that I went to from 20 to 24. And I remember the people who helped me, and I remember the people who don't or didn't. And I always wanted to be the person who helped people because people helped me get to that place. If it wasn't for all the Fit Finleys and then the Pete Robertson, the Terry Rudges and the Dave Taylors who put me in, and especially Dave being number one, and Pete Robertson, Terry Rudge, and if you don't know who they are, you should do if you know about your British wrestling. They travelled all over the world, and at 20, they decided that I was good enough to go with them and travel with them on their tours around the world. And so they did things for me that they didn't need to. And so I've always tried to do that. So Triple H came into my life for a short time. With their WCW had huge plans for us as a tag team. We trained, and we were only together about 6 weeks on TV, and his contract was up. And I told him, you need to leave and go to WWE, because they'd actually offered us both a deal. The truth is, they'd offered us both a deal. And I was already signed up to WCW, and I was getting a guaranteed contract, which you didn't get in WWE at the time. You just got paid off what they earned. There was no guaranteed contracts in those days, 94. And I was getting the guaranteed money, and WCW was also paying for my family and paying for the green cards and all that, which costs a fortune, and it was all part of my deal. I was very happy working whatever amount of times WCW and that. And WWE at the time were working 300 days a year or a bit less, as you probably might have read about in other people's books. And I said to Triple H, you need to do that, because I've already done that for the last 10 years. I don't, that's what you need is reps. Everybody who's a wrestler needs reps of some kind. Whether it's now, you've got wrestling schools, you can have reps. There was none of that. It was like, you need to get out there. So he said, I don't want to go because we got this thing. They were going to put a lady called Sherry Martel with us, and they were going to make us into the WCW Tag Team Champions. That was what we were told. And I said, no, you need to go. And he went. And it worked out pretty well for him, didn't it? But I got back. I'd been home for a month, for a few weeks at Christmas, whatever, that end of 94. I get back in the beginning of 95. And Ric Flair tells a different story. the only people that knew that Triple H had left WCW was myself, Triple H, and Eric Bischoff. And I get back to TV, which was the first day back in January of TV, and I get back there, and Ric Flair was in charge of the creative at that particular time, and he said, "Where's Paul Levesque?" As he was, "Where's Levesque?" And he'll tell you that no. I said, "You better." I didn't want to say so. If he didn't know, I said, "You better go and ask Eric." You know, like, I'm none of my business telling you. So he came back. He went, "He's gone." I went, "Yeah, I know." But I'm not going to, I won't tell anybody anything unless I'm, all the blowtorch to my head, I'm not going to tell you anything. Right? So, and I'm sat on like it was a place called Center Stage in Atlanta where we used to tape most of this. If you ever watch on the network, WCW Saturday Night, it's from Center Stage most of the time. And it's a music venue. It's still in Atlanta, and there's still people run shows there. I think NWA run shows there, and it's got only holds 700 or 800 people, but it's like a little bleachers and that. And I'm sat about 4 rows up in the bleachers, and the ring's there. And Rick said, "What are we going to do?" And I looked across on the other side of the ring, and sat there is Bobby Eaton, and they weren't doing a lot with Bobby. And I went, I don't know why, and this incredible piece of fortune for me that my brain kicked in at the time, and I went, "Can you put me with Bobby Eaton, please? Because I'm looking at the best tag team wrestler in the world sat across the room from me, and I get on as everybody gets on incredibly well with Bobby, or got on with Bobby Eaton." And he went, and I said, and I think this is what happened. Again, certain things are a bit fuzzy. That Christmas, I'd seen a little piece of a film that I'd seen years ago, My Fair Lady. Some of you may have seen it. And I went, I can do the My Fair Lady thing with Bobby Eaton. And he went, "Okay." And so that was it. We went off and I was in a tag team called the Blue Bloods. Well, Rick, Arn Anderson, and Bobby Eaton traveled together. So that's how I ended up just getting, "Do you want to get in the car with us?" "Yeah." And so at 26, I think, was I 26 then? Yeah, I'll be 26. I'm traveling with Ric Flair, and for the next nearly 2 years, I traveled with Rick. And then I ended up traveling with him a lot in the early 2000s, because it would be me, Triple H, and Rick. We would travel together, and Arn sometimes. Well, Rick had calmed down a bit by then. He hadn't calmed down at all, and so we proper caned it. And I mean, like, and oh dear me, because Rick's Rick, and wherever he goes, he wants to go out. And Arn used to like to go out, and Bobby would just go along, and so I would go along. And there's one particular time when we did a 3-day based out of Las Vegas. Oh dear. And it was a place called the Red Rocks Amphitheater in Arizona. And we flew into Vegas. We based ourselves there at this place called, oh God, what was that called? It was right across the street from the Mirage. And it was a small hotel, but it was a small, if you've been to Vegas, any of you, those big hotels seem appealing until you get in them. And they're a nightmare because you can't get, it takes you 3 hours to get anywhere, right? You know, and they make sure you walk through all, so you just can't walk in and out the door. And so the first time you go, it's great. But after a while, you learn to stay in a small hotel, and then you can just walk into those hotels and use their facilities without having the deal of having to get hustled constantly. Well, there's a place right across the street. I think it was called the Golden... No, it wasn't the Golden Nugget. I forget now. But it was right across the street from the Mirage. we based ourselves there. We did the Red Rocks Amphitheatre, which I have a complete other story about. It rained and did all kinds of stuff, but we did that. We got back into Vegas, and we didn't. And then we had Vegas on the Saturday night, and we just hammered it. And I mean, really hammered it. And I know, because for one 3-hour session at the pool bar at the Mirage, I did the stupid thing of saying, because Rick would always pay, right? And Arn certainly wouldn't, because his hands somehow never, and Bobby, nobody ever asked Bobby to pay. You know, I made this stupid suggestion because I felt I've always, again, the people who trained me, not Dave, because Dave is tight as an at's chuff when it comes to money, right? But Johnny Saint, Pete Roberts, Terry Rudge, don't be a ponce. Never ponce off anybody, right? Don't ever just pay your way, and that's, luckily, they rubbed off on me and not the other people that I were, because there was a lot of wrestlers, pretty good ponces, right? They're like this, and I don't, it makes me cringe all that. I won't try and get anything for nothing, or I always pay my way. It's just the way I am, right? So, but Rick was constantly paying, and I just felt bad. And I went, I'll get this one. 3 hours, and just for the four of us, my bar bill was $400. That was the only time I ever offered. So I didn't feel like a ponce, but because I'd at least done it once. And there is some of this story I have to leave out. And it's not to protect me. But I can give you the end of it. And the end of it was the last day of this tour, after 3 days in Las Vegas of sheer debauchery. And again, there's nothing for me to, but there was a lot going on. And obviously Rick's Rick, and you know enough about him, and I can just leave it up to your imaginations. One day, I do need to go back to the Mirage and pick my liver up from the cloakroom, because it's still in there from 1995. I left it there. We have to leave Las Vegas on a Monday, and it's a holiday in America, a bank holiday of some type. And we have to drive to a place called Lancaster, California. The only other thing to do is to fly to LA from Vegas and then drive back nearly 100 miles into the middle of the desert, which Lancaster, California is. It is right in the middle of the desert. It's a town, it's just on the borders of Arizona, and it is a dust bowl, and I don't know how anybody can live there, but they do, right? And it was the state fair. WCW used to do things that, you know, you wouldn't think, like really odd shows. Like there's a place called Davie in Florida where you used to have Sting and Vader and Ric Flair and people on in a tiny little rodeo, an outside rodeo, and we used to get changed in these dirty caravans outside. And, you know, like, and again, all these things you ask me, the illusion gets broken. Oh, this is, after a while, yeah, I'm going to America, and then, this is a piss hole. Like, what? Like, you know, there's, yes, you're going to New York, and you're going to Chicago, and then there's Davie, Florida, which is a piss hole. Don't ever go. And, you know, like, so you find out wrestling's wrestling. After a while, it all becomes the same. So instead of flying to which a lot of the people did, they flew from Vegas to Los Angeles and drove back, and then drove back because we were flying out home on a red-eye, because this was an afternoon show in Lancaster on the bank holiday. We decided we'll drive, right? It's only 3 hours through the desert. So Rick said, just leave the tickets, I'll book the car. So he books a car. He goes and picks the car up. He can't get his usual Cadillac or Lincoln. He's in this little Dodge, whatever it was, that was a tiny little car, was the only car left, because it's a bank holiday, right? But he's Ric Flair, and he's gone there, and he's gone, I want a Cadillac, and they've gone, we haven't got any, Mr. Flair. You know, you've got that. Here's the keys. It's got wind-down windows. Well, I'm Ric Flair. Don't care who you are. Here you go. You've got the worst car on the lot, because that's the only car left on the lot. There you go. So he comes back to the hotel, and he's fuming. And he's not happy at all, because he's in the... Now, the year before, I'd done Lancaster, California, and I knew that it was an outside show. It was a state fair for Lancaster, and it was an outside show in the desert with tents and then, like, all kinds of things. And a big, like, the traveling fair came in, and it was all kind, because there was nothing, and there is nothing that still goes on in Lancaster, California, except for once a year, the state fair on this particular bank holiday. And it's the middle of the summer. And it's red hot, and it's 120 whatever degrees in the middle of the desert. It's not, it's mental that anybody wants to live there, right? So, I'd been the year before. Rick turns up at the hotel, fuming already. Oh, I've got to backtrack a bit. The Easter, this is a bit in the summer. The Easter before that, Rick had started opening up Gold's Gyms. He had one in Charlotte, and then he opened up one in St. Martin. Rick had opened a Gold's Gym in part of a hotel, big hotel complex in St. Martin. He took the entire crew of us for Easter, for 4 days, to do one show in St. Martin, which was incredible, and stay in this massive big casino so we could open this gym. The gym, by the way, was about as big as his stage. It was just a bit, but it was his thing, and he also had a place down there. So we all go thinking, and we're staying in this big resort in this is the Easter, and I remember because I wrestled Ricky Steamboat, and then we go to the show thinking, it's a big resort, it's going to be a show. No, again, all these things are like reality checks. We were in a tin shed, and there was 100 people in it. In St. Martin. But it was what we did do was all the wrestlers were there for the opening of Ric Flair's Gold's Gym in St. Martin. So, fast track again back to Las Vegas. Rick's fuming about the car, but also worried because he's just heard there's a tornado, or a hurricane, what has just happened now, going to hit St. Martin. So, he picks us up and he's like, I can't believe it. And and then he tells me and tells the three of us, me, Arn, and Bobby, that he hasn't bought any insurance on the gym. So I'm like, okay, so imagine 3 days of being on the batter like that, going, oh. And, okay, well, that's all right. We go to the gym because don't matter how much we did or what we did, everybody trained. Like Bobby, not so much. He would just go and have a sauna, but we all trained. He'd sweat it out. We'd all go and train, and me and Rick would do squats together, and Arn would do his whatever he did and that. But we'd all trained, so we always got this, sweated everything out. So we go to the gym, and he's doing his training, but you can see he's bothered. And I'm just sort of finding it funny. One good thing about me, when I get to the end of my tether, unlike some people who start smashing things up and going haywire, I just start laughing. Whatever it is, nervous exhaustion or whatever, thankfully, at the worst possible times, I've been on planes that have nearly crashed. I've been on all kinds of stuff, some serious things. There's a bit of my, twisted brain kicks in, and I just find it funny, and I just start laughing, which is better than the opposite, right, and start getting in all kinds of bother. So I'm just finding this a little bit amusing and still trying to sweat a lot of liquor out of me. We get in the car, we drive, and there's a Subway there, and we go in, and we get whatever we get in, and I'm watching, Rick's bought his first, and he's back in the car. And I'm watching as they're making the sandwiches, I'm watching the news on the TV. And I'm watching all these trees, like these palm trees, touching the floor. And then I can see, hurricane whatever, and you can probably look this up in the summer of 1995, has hit St. Martin. And I'm watching buildings go and everything. And I get back in the car, and as soon as we take off out of Las Vegas, and you can be on the strip in Las Vegas, and within 3 minutes you're on the highway into the desert. Or you were in those days. It's a bit more built up now as you go outside, but it was literally off the strip, 2 or 3, less than 2 miles. You were completely in the desert. And we get, and I'm just eating my sandwich first and drink, and I went, "Hey Rick," I said, "I've just seen the news," because he hadn't seen it. I said, and we didn't have cell phones in those days. We didn't have none of that. I said, well, he might have done, but I can't remember him having a phone. I certainly didn't. He went, I said, hurricanes just hit St. Martin. And I'm sat in the back seat, and I can see the mirror there, and I can see his face, and he's just gone, "Oh no, brother." And so he pulls over, and he goes into a phone box, and he's bum, and he gets back in the car. The whole gym has gone. And then he tells me there's 100 grand's worth of gear gone with it. And so Hans just gone, "Well, that serves you right." And I've just cracked up. And he's just like, I can't say because there's ladies in there, and I apologise, ladies, that I swore at the very beginning of this because I don't like swearing around ladies and children, and I apologise greatly, but I had to get that song gag out. Right? I don't like swearing in front, but there was a lot of F words coming out of him and all kinds, and he was like, and I've just lost the plot, and I'm laughing, and laughing so much I thought I was going to die because I got bits of like Subway coming down my nose and stuff. And Arn Anderson, I've set him off laughing and Bobby Eaton off laughing. Well, the more we're laughing, the more he's getting mad. And the more we're going out into the desert. And finally, I get my composure for a second, and I realise, we're going to Lancaster. Because this is how I have always dressed from about 20 onwards when I go most places. Unless I know there's a reason why. There's a good reason if I'm not dressed up because of considering myself a certain style of professional. I was sat, I'd forgot to tell him about this. I better tell him. He's in a white 3-piece suit, but just and I've gone, "Oh, Rick, I should have warned you. You weren't on this show last year. It's a dust bowl in the middle of the desert. Maybe you want to pull over and just change into your shorts and your shirt and T-shirt, because nobody can see us going into the back of this place. We get changed in a tent at the back." And I'm explaining how this place is a desert with a tent to get changed in, because that's all it was just a small tent, like a marquee at a garden fete or something. That was the change, and like outside toilets. And he was going, I can't do that. I'm Rick. Oh, okay. And now he's just going off. So the more he's going off, the more we all keep giggling. And eventually we stop in this. There's like one. There used to be. I don't know what there is now, because things have changed. It's been years since I've drove that. But there used to be one rest area right in the middle of the desert, like an oasis. And we stopped there. And Arn Anderson used to, once he'd been drinking, he used to eat a lot of junk food, and he just went and bought the greasiest, horriblest stuff you could possibly buy, and he sat there in the car, and we take off again, and he's eating that, and Rick's looking at him disgusted and keep blowing, and eventually we're just laughing, and Rick's gone, I can't believe it. I'm Ric Flair, the nature boy. I'm used to, and he started doing Ric Flair. He's going, I'm used to riding in limousines and flying in Learjets. I wear three-piece suits and I'm sat in a shit buck Dodge in the middle of the desert with 3 drunk lunatics. And the Gila monsters, which are, there's only 2 types of poisonous lizard in the world. One of them lives in the deserts of Arizona, which is a Gila monster. And there's one in Mexico. Basically, the same desert spreads over into Mexico, called a bearded lizard. It's the same lizard, just a bit different because the geography is different. And the Gila monsters. And then, so when we finished laughing about that, Bobby Eaton said, oh, he used to always call me Lord. He went, oh, Lord's got some lizards. And Rick sort of got his composure and he went, are they alive? And Arn Anderson went, no, he's got them nailed to a board in his house. Which set him off again, swearing, throwing, smashing the, and we just drive, and all you can see is sand. And so I'm choking again and hanging out the window. So this goes on for 3 hours, where we just keep breaking down laughing, and he's just getting madder and madder. And with that bleached hair, and purple, his ears are purple, his face is, and he's just, and he's smashing the, and just like, and it's like a record. I'm Ric Flair, what am I doing? And which is just non-stop. So we finally pull into this place, and he's going, straight away, well, it's a shithole. I went, I told you. And by then, again, I'm only 26, but we're used to each other. So I talked, it's Ric Flair, but it's just normal for me now. I've been telling him that for the last 3 hours. He should have changed 3 hours ago. And so he went, I can't stand it. You got to remember, white crocodile skin shoes, white pants, white vest. I think he had a pastel pink shirt on. He gets out the door, out the car. He goes, like that. I get out, we grab our bags, and he slams the door, and a big, complete dust of sand just went woof all over him. And so now, all you can see is a red Ric Flair covered in red sand, and his eyes sticking out, and he just went, he can't see anything else but red. He's just covered in sand, and he just went, rah! And just run off. And just run into the desert. And so the 3 of us are just bent over like catching our breaths. And he just went. And he went off. And as he's running, we can't see him anymore because there's dust just coming up behind him. Because it's so dry and so there's no humidity at all. It's like really. So we just went in the tent, and eventually he comes back, and he'd found whatever facilities there were, and he'd washed the stuff off his, like there's still bits of it, but he'd stripped down, and he didn't want it, so that was it for that day. So that was my life for a few years, and that's just the tame bits.